Yeah, there we go. Cool. Well, welcome everyone to Excel training. I'm Sonam. I'm obviously very excited to be here, but I'm more excited that you've all kind of shown up live, taken some time to be here with me. Before I start, if you haven't already downloaded the workbook that I'm going to be going through, I've put the kind of link in the chat. You just have to pop your email in and then you should get an email in your inbox. You don't have to follow along. You don't have to, you're not going to miss out on anything. It's just, I know that some people like to follow along in real time. It helps with like retention and stuff. So whatever suits you, if you're listening to this on the go, then totally fine as well, because you'll still be able to extract some information. So I suspect that most of us have pretty much a love-hate relationship with Excel. It's great when it works, but the other like 99% of the time, it's basically hair-pullingly frustrating. And the way that I feel is that Excel should be a tool. So it should always just make what we do better, faster, quicker, more efficient. And I think sometimes it just becomes this like beast of like a cloud that hangs over everyone. It's always a peers and skill set must be like good at Excel and stuff like that, but what does that really mean? So before I jump into the actual Excel sort of training part, I just want to introduce myself. So I am Sonam, as I said. I am a qualified accountant, and I've actually spent pretty much a decade partnering with different departments across multiple types of businesses. So I'm not kind of your bookkeeping accountant. I was really interested in basically helping people get the most out of data and understanding financials, because obviously it's a core part of any business. When I started my career, I actually didn't know anything about Excel. So I didn't even know what a cell was. All I knew was I wanted to progress my career at warp speed. But as I'm sure you guys feel every single day, there was only like a limited amount of time to do the stuff that needed to be done. So I learned lots of different tools and softwares, but I found that actually Excel was the one that had the most impact in helping me streamline my workload and my tasks. And what that meant was I then had more time to focus on like the real value add pieces of my job, which ultimately is what kind of catapulted my career trajectory. So I kind of fell in love with Excel through the process. And I used to then kind of, alongside my day job, run informal trainings with my colleagues across the businesses and just really help them kind of maximize their time. I had some colleagues who would like type stuff into a calculator and then put it into Excel. And I had other colleagues who would write formulas incorrectly. So they're really just a mix of like trying to help people see that there's only a few things that you kind of need to clear up, and it can really change your day in Excel. So fast forward to today, I basically started ExcelM8 training because I kind of just saw the same problems over and over again that specifically non-finance people kind of dealt with. So obviously, if you're a finance person, the likelihood is you're going to be in spreadsheets kind of as a core part of your day job, whereas non-finance people tend to need Excel as a tool. And I thought, hold on, there's really just, like a few things that you kind of need to know to unlock Excel's power. Kind of in the same way as to learn to drive or to be a good driver, you don't need to know every detail about a car. You just need to kind of know the basics and the important stuff. So that's what my approach is to teaching Excel. I kind of only share what I know really works based on my experience, based on research, and things that will really move the needle in terms of increasing your productivity and creating time in your day so you can do more of what you love. So yeah, in short, I am on a mission to remove the overwhelm that comes with Excel for quite a lot of us. And I just really love teaching practical, immediately actionable tips that you can use in your day-to-day. So a lot of these webinars I do kind of jump around in tools and stuff because I'm kind of just trying to get the most high impact stuff out there. I do sort of do more detailed courses and stuff, but this is like my favorite way to basically get the word out there, to like help people kind of see you kind of only need a few things and it can make a big difference in your day. So How this training will work, like I said, there's probably quite a lot of different job roles and people and like confidence levels with Excel in this. So I'm hoping that the few things that I can get through are universally applicable. And obviously, if we end up doing more of these like free series like of webinars, then I would love to like get your feedback so that I can make content that's specifically useful for you. I'm going to start with a meaty topic, which is the best function to use to search for something specific within datasets. And then if we have time, I will cover off a few of like my kind of top viewing hacks, accessibility hacks that will save you time and hopefully a bit of frustration. Just a couple of things to note. There is obviously some assumed knowledge of Excel, so it's not obviously starting at the basics. But if you do get lost or stuck at any point, you can drop me an email after the webinar and I would be more than happy to help you. And if I do end up using shortcuts or some things that aren't available on a Mac, again, I can follow up with you and translate those because I am through and through a Windows girly, so and I use Microsoft 365. But other than that, let me share my screen. Sorry, I've got so many different screens going. Let me. Okay, I'm going to do the classic. Can you see my screen? One slide share. So bear with. Ooh, I've lost you guys. There we go. Okay. Share my screen. There we go. Can we see my screen?
Yeah. Yeah, we can see it.
Excel training, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, cool. So let me move things around a bit. Perfect. Right, so I have obviously jumped ahead from my slides, my pretty slides. But here we go. Okay, so jumping straight in to the meaty function I was talking about, I wanted to talk about a lookup function. So if you have heard of lookups, you'll know what I'm talking about. It's kind of one of the most popular things people use Excel for. And if you haven't, it's basically, think of it as something that helps you search for specific data and returns values from the related columns and rows. So it's really useful to use lookup functions for quickly finding and organizing data without having to sort of do it manually or like flip between workbooks all the time. Think of like, when you have like large lists and you want to populate them across, like you could have customer details or you could have product details and you want to link like warehouses. There's so many kind of universal use cases. So yeah, the way I like to sort of think of it as an analogy is the lookup functions are basically like an index at the back of a book that will help you locate specific words or phrases or paragraphs in the body of the book. And Microsoft has a whole host of lookup functions. There's probably about 10 or so. And you might think that the one I'm going to go through is VLOOKUP, but I just want you to know that VLOOKUP is absolutely dead. It is clunky, it's outdated. So if you do know it, please delete it out of your mind and replace it with a much better, more usable function called XLOOKUP. What Microsoft did is they basically took up all of the information that they had for the last like 30 years of how they've created functions and stuff. And they realized that people were creating workarounds for lookups to make them work more intuitively and easier. So with an XLOOKUP, it's really straightforward and more powerful. And you can kind of take it to the extreme and get really like fancy with like coupling up and putting loads in together, or you can keep it really simple and basically completely replace what your VLOOKUP does. For those of you that know VLOOKUPs, you'll know that it kind of only reads in one direction, so that's left to right, whereas an XLOOKUP, you can look right to left, up and down and up. So it's really like flexible comparatively, so it's really worth knowing. Before we kind of look at an example of how an XLOOKUP works, I wanted to just walk through the breakdown of a function, because I think that that's, you know, once you can understand how Excel functions are actually made up, it's much easier to go out and sort of learn more of them rather than just relying on, you know, kind of rote learning how to create a function. So with Excel functions, they will always have mandatory and optional conditions. So most of the time, all the functions are actually powerful enough with just the mandatory conditions. And the same can be said for XLOOKUP. So with XLOOKUP, it's basically 3 conditions that are mandatory, which means it's 3 quick steps to make a perfectly functional lookup value. So the first condition we have is what Excel will call a lookup value. This is effectively the search term. So this is the thing that you want to tell Excel to look for. And it's usually a single word or phrase, so it's not a collection of cells. So the good way to remember it is like it's the first kind of condition, which means it's one phrase or one word. Then the second condition is the area or collection of cells where that word or phrase exists. So basically in the index in a book, it's like, oh, it's on page 3, for example. And then finally, you want to tell Excel, okay, once you've found that word in this collection of cells, I want you to look at this related collection of cells and tell me what the corresponding value is. So the thing here that is like super key to note is that these 2 areas for conditions 2 and 3 need to basically be the same size, and they're usually either a whole column or a whole row. So kind of when you think about the fact that it's just 3 things like that, you don't have to count, you don't have to look up anywhere, you just set it up and you can make it as dynamic as you want. This function becomes really flexible and powerful and easy to use. So let's jump into Excel and I will show you a worked example. And I can see on the chat, actually, people have, thanks Fern for sharing the workbook. And I will share it on my screen here. Fabulous. Okay, so you should have a tab that says your notes. This is just in case you wanted to type anything and then have it all in one place. You can just start typing there. But I will jump in here and then I'll show you something where you can use both screens at the same time. So pulling this back up again, we have the XLOOKUP with the mandatory conditions. Now, bear in mind that we're looking at a very small data set here, which is not necessarily the most obvious use case of it, but obviously here I'm just kind of trying to illustrate that this is how we would be using lookups. So if we look at this example over here, the question and the data that we have is talking about some customer sales data. So we've got some customers here and you've got the January, February and March sales data. So we're being asked to find the February 24 revenue for the selected customer, which is in this situation, Audi. Generally, as like a rule of thumb, before you're writing sort of any formulas in Excel or calling up any functions, it's always a good idea to kind of understand what all the different parts will be because ultimately it just makes it easier to write the formula, but it also means that you're less likely to get an error. What I find that a lot of people do is sometimes they will write a formula incorrectly, but Excel still outputs an answer. And if you have no sort of expectation or understanding of what the answer should look like, you might incorrectly think that that's the right answer. So before we start writing out the formula, let's look at the three parts. So the first part, which is the term Excel needs to look for. Well, we know that that is a singular word or phrase, and in this question, it's going to be Audi. Then we're saying, where does this word Audi live in our data set? So where can Excel find it? So when we look at this question data, we can see that Audi exists in this first column. So this collection of cells over here, where Audi is somewhere in that list. And then finally, we want to say, okay, well, now that you know that Audi is in that first column, where should I look to give you the information that you want that's related to that? And in the question, we're asked for Feb 24. So we know that the information that we want is in the third column. Now, I've just kind of highlighted the answer that we're going for, just so that it's kind of very clear. But in a normal situation, you'd probably have this whole data set on a different tab or even in a different workbook. And so you want to make it as easy as possible to find the information that you need and make sure that the data is set up in the best way for you in the first place. So now that we know kind of what we're going to put in what parts of the functions, we can start writing the Excel function. So to write any formulas, you press equal when you're in the cell. So I'm going to click on this cell, which is the answer box, and press equals. And then I'm just going to start typing XLOOKUP, and you'll notice that Excel kind of tries to preempt what you're looking for. So it filters out its whole list of functions and it says, oh, okay, these are all the ones that start with X. Now you can see here, XLOOKUP is second on the list. So you can just use your arrow keys to sort of move up and down. And then if you press tab, it will basically save you writing the rest of it, which I know sounds like a really small time saving, but the good thing about Excel, or the big thing to know about Excel, is it's actually just a compounding effect of all of these small changes. There's no like silver bullet. So, doing something like that, pressing tab, using your keyboard rather than your mouse, that all ends up saving you hours in your week over time, but it's just something that you have to learn to get used to. So back to the function. So you press tab and it calls up the function for you, and it also puts in that opening bracket, which is obviously super necessary when you are writing functions. So now we can see that it's the cursor is showing that we are in the first condition of the XLOOKUP function, and that is saying that it's a lookup value. And you can see that because it's bolded out of the whole kind of explanation of the formula. So we already determined that Audi, i.e. this cell over here, is our lookup value, so our search term. Now we want to press comma so that we can go to the next mandatory condition, which is lookup array. Array is basically just a fancy way of Excel saying collection of cells or area. So in this case, we already determined that the word Audi lives in this first column here. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight the first column, and I'm going to take it all the way from row 1 over here down to row 9. So now you can see that Excel has created this reference in red, which is D23 to D31. Now, the final mandatory condition we want is our return array, which Excel is basically saying what is the collection of cells where the related data is that you want me to output. So we already identified that it was the Feb 24 column. And so again, I'm going to select all of those 9 rows long. So I will state it again that it's really important in all lookup functions that the areas of the two conditions, specifically for XLOOKUP, but for any others, that you are telling Excel to look for data in have to be the same. It will cause errors or give you wrong answers because basically Excel works on a kind of a linear one-to-one. So if you imagine it's like a mirror image of Excel saying Audi is on the 5th row in this data set. So now I know that in the corresponding area, I need to go 5 rows down. So if things are 2 different sizes, it just confuses Excel. So the good way to check that is obviously looking at the colors, and you can see that these are both the same size boxes, but you could also just do a quick check of the numbers. So making sure that 23 and 31 is 23 and 31 if you're doing column references, or the letters if you are doing row references. So we've got our lookup value, which is Audi. We've got our lookup area, which is the customer name column. And then we have our return area, which is the February 24 revenue column. Now, the rest of these options, as I said, are optional, and you can see that they're optional because they have square brackets around them. So if you see over here, if not found is in square brackets. I would say don't use those if you're just getting to grips with an Excel formula. But if you do know how to use them, go ahead, because all it does is make your function much more powerful. So I'm going to go ahead and close that and press enter. And we can see that we've correctly got the answer of 21,953. So it's basically as easy as that. And you can now make it, because we decided to put this as a reference and didn't actually type in Audi here, which I know is how some people like to set up formulas. It means that we've now made it a flexible function. So by referencing this cell, which has the value in it, we can now change this. So if I wrote Ford here, it would now pick up Ford's value of 7349 in February. The reason it's gone red is because I have used something called conditional formatting, which says it's green if it's the correct answer and it's red if it's not. So in this case, it has to be Audi's answer for it to be green. For those of you that have the workbook, feel free to have a go at the practice question underneath. It's pretty much the same, so try not to obviously copy the formula we've just done and try and recreate it. And I have lots more practice questions as well. If you're interested, I'll be happy to send them over. So that is basically XLOOKUP. The other 2 things I wanted to warn you about, aside from the size of the area, is making sure that the reference that you use is an exact match. So what that means is basically Excel will always look for exactly what you ask it to look for. So in this situation, we've said Audi. If I had written Audi, say, with a space, suddenly Excel can't understand, and you get this very common, very familiar NA error. So just be careful of those rogue spaces that we tend to put at the end of, our words. And also just make sure sometimes if you do get NA errors that the word is actually the same, there's no typo, and it actually exists in your data set. So for example, if I wrote my name, I do not exist in here, so the answer is going to be wrong, or NA. And yeah, that's basically it on XLOOKUP. Pretty much a whistle-stop tour. But the next thing I want to show you is more of a quick viewing accessibility kind of hack. And I will flip to the next sheet. Okay, so let's delete that out. I'm not sure how many of you have second screens or second monitors, but I find myself in situations a lot of the time where I'm probably only working off my laptop screen, but I've got like 2 Excel workbooks, or I've got 2, I need to reference 2 sheets. If, for example, I'm on new window and then I need to go to like the contents tab, and I'm just basically flipping through and I'm kind of giving myself vertigo because I've like lost myself on both sheets. A really, really, really cool hack for this is to use the new window option within Excel. So if you navigate up here to the View tab, you'll have all of these different options, and under Window, you can do something called New Window. What it does, you can see here, if I drag this down, it will open up a new window of exactly the same workbook. So that is a carbon copy mirror image. It's not a different version, so you won't have version control issues. It is basically saying, I want exactly another copy of this. So if I show you what I mean, you will see changes happening in real time. So if I go there, you can see that on both screens, this one says 2 and this one will say 1. You can see that there are the same changes happening. So that's all well and good, but then you still have to kind of flip between these 2 tabs. And that's where this handy Windows shortcut comes in. So you can actually use this for anything in a Windows kind of situation. It doesn't have to just be Excel or Microsoft. It can be Google Chrome or anything like that. So what you want to do is on your keyboard, you should have the little Windows icon. If you press that and you press one of your arrows, so let's say the right arrow key, that will snap this window to the right automatically. If you press it to the left, it snaps it to the left. And now you can see that Microsoft Windows has said, oh, okay, I noticed that there's a blank screen on this side. What do you want me to put in there? You can just put the other screen. So now you have both screens here. So this is the second screen. This is super useful, if you have, say, you've got your data set on one side, you've got your Excel on one side, and then you've got your Chrome on the other, or your emails on the other, and you can kind of shift between. The next thing that I want to show you, let me get rid of one of these, no longer need them both. The next thing I wanted to show you is freeze panes. So this is where, you might be kind of scrolling and you've got like thousands of lines of data. So you've gone thousands of rows down, thousands of columns across. And then lo and behold, you've realized you have no idea what column header or what row data you're referencing. So freeze panes is super helpful because it just keeps specific sections of your Excel sheet locked. In this situation, you can see that I've frozen everything in the top 3 rows, which means that no matter how many rows I go down or no matter how many columns I go across, it's always going to show me the top section. The way to do this is, again, look at the View tab and have a wander over to the section here called Freeze Panes. Now, because my panes are already frozen, the option here is to unfreeze. So Excel has a lot of these kind of buttons peppered around. They're called toggle buttons. So it's almost like, think of it as a switch. Every time you press it, it does something different until it hits the start of the cycle again. So here, because it's frozen already, we want to unfreeze it. Now you can see when I scroll down, I lose that top header. Now, the way freeze panes works is it will always, when you ask it to freeze, it will always freeze to the right of and below the cell that you are selected in. So if you want to freeze this section over here, so everything to the left, you would select, say, this cell over here, navigate to the View tab, and then click on Freeze Panes. Now you can see that this and this is frozen. So when you move to the right, this section stays where it is. And when you move down, this section stays where it is. This can be really helpful when you've got, say, I don't know, some kind of Excel model, or if you're looking at some finances or like a P&L statement, and you just want to freeze the months at the top and you want to freeze the kind of row headers on the side. Really useful to do it that way. The other thing that you could do is, if I unfreeze it, if you select whole rows, then that will freeze whole sections. So you have to highlight the row or you have to highlight the column. And you do that by actually selecting on the letter or the number, and then clicking on freeze panes, and there you have it. So there's a couple of other options here, but I would say don't bother learning them and don't use them, because for some reason, I don't know why Excel thought they were useful, but they basically will only freeze anything from the topmost corner. And most people start kind of typing in Excel in like cell B2 rather than all the way up in A1. So that is freeze. I'm going to show you one more quick trick on viewing stuff, and then I think there might be a couple of minutes for some questions if anyone has some. So I don't know how many of you do this, but when you are, you've created a really nice Excel spreadsheet and you want to share it with your manager and you want to make it look a bit more aesthetically pleasing, I know a lot of people would then select all and probably go and do white fill to make it nice and pretty and get rid of all of those lines. There's a few problems with this. Firstly, it's just a bit insane because you're wasting your own time by creating more work. And also you end up creating a really massive workbook unnecessarily, because what you've gone and told Excel is, I want you to populate every single cell in this sheet, which is the millionth row and the XFD column, which I don't even know what kind of numbered column that would be. And then I want you to go and save it. So obviously the file size becomes massive. Instead, all you need to do is, once you're happy and you've got everything in the squares and the boxes and the cells that you want them in, navigate again to our trusty old view tab. And you can now come to this section here which says show. Here you have got the option to turn off grid lines. And voila, it has the same impact as coloring those cells in white, but this is much quicker and much more personalized. If your manager likes to see the grid, but you don't, you can have your own settings per the workbook without having to reformat everything. While we're here, you can also remove the formula bar, which is sometimes really useful when you don't want to kind of draw attention to your formulas or anything like that. And you can also remove your headings, which is the column and the row headers. Again, I barely use that, and I use Excel pretty much every day in my life, but something good to know because it helps when you are presenting Excel screens, for example, if you ever need to do that as part of your day job. So that is, I'm going to stop there and see if there are any questions or if anyone kind of has anything they want to ask. Bear in mind, like I said, this was kind of like an intro / see what the kind of appetite is, and I'm very happy to take requests if people want me to kind of go through anything else. And yeah, feel free to just pop them in the chat or go off mute if you want.
No questions for me, but this was really, really useful. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Okay, well then, before we close off, I just have one more thing I'd like to share, which is a very quick, give me 1 second. What do you think? With the number of these that I do, I would be very slick at sharing my screen. I am not. Okay, so yeah, I was just going to say, I've got a little QR code. If you there we go. Okay, if you can see this, can you see my screen? It doesn't seem to want to change. There we go.
It's just a blank slide at the moment, Sam. I'm not sure why. You can see the ExcelM8, but I can't see any content.
Oh, hold on. Let me try that again. It was this. Here we go. I will just share my screen again for those of you that have a couple of minutes to spare.
Yeah.
I think you can see that now, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Do not tell Microsoft I'm cheating on it by using Canva. But yeah, so I have a tiny little form there. It's not like, it's literally got 3 questions on it, and it's basically asking if you would like more of these series, then I'm happy to host, but if you just let me know content. Secondly, if you would like a huge discount to my digital courses, then you can pop kind of your interest in there. And if you have kind of any other notes or anything else, it would obviously massively help me to build better content for you. And I guess, yeah, just show up more to help everyone kind of conquer Excel. So I will leave that kind of QR code up.
People often don't know what they don't know. So would it be possible for you to send me a list of all the different kind of functions that you could train people on?
Yep.
An example of kind of like how you use them so that they understand what that function means.
Yep.
Then I can send that out with the QR code and say, hey, what's
Yeah.
the interest? Which are the main areas people would like a session on?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, what I like to do is, what I find really helpful is if people tell me their job roles or their departments or how they kind of potentially work with data, because I then have a lot of narratives of like, oh, I know that you kind of maybe do this. What about using this function? So sometimes it's, you know, like you said, you don't know what you don't know. And I find that telling someone, oh, this function, some ifs exist, they're like, okay, cool, but I have no idea how I'm going to use it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I find it actually useful kind of speaking to people and having their narrative, because then I'm definitely creating something that I know will help you. But for sure, I will send that over, and the QR code, as many of you that can fill it out now, that would be amazing. Because yeah, like I said, I love making the most relevant content, and the only way I know how to do that is by talking to you guys. So I will leave that up there, and obviously if you have any questions, then let me know. But thank you so much for the lovely comments, and I'm glad you found it useful.
I did, thank you. I have to drop, but this was
No
a really
worries.
great session. Thank you so